Today is the 30th Sunday of the year. Our gospel text is Matthew chapter 22, verses 34 through 40. It is the story of the Pharisees asking the question, which is the greatest of the commandments? And Jesus gives the great commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul. And then he cites another part of the Torah, love your neighbor as yourself. Before we examine that text, I'd like to offer two preliminary comments. First of all, Jesus is the fulfillment of everything the Torah is about. The great promise, I am with you. Matthew's gospel calls Jesus Emmanuel, God is with us. Jesus is the enfleshing of the eternal God. That's who he is. That's what he is. That's what meaning he has for us. He does not come to us first and foremost as a moral teacher. And if we take his texts as if he was just a moral teacher, we will completely not only miss the point and the meaning of what he has on offer, but we'll distort it. We'll misrepresent the incarnation. We must think in terms of who he is and why he is here, what he expresses. He is the enfleshing of God, God who is love, God who intends to liberate us in him, with him, and through him. Which brings me to the second preliminary point. In the Creed, we profess our faith in Jesus, the Son of God, become human. That's who he is. That's the heart and soul of our faith. It is our life in him. We are baptized into him. That's the context within which we go to the divine revelation to seek guidance and life. Remember in the Mass at the end of the Eucharistic prayer, the celebrant says, through him, with him, in him. This is another statement of the heart and soul of our faith. So to the text, Matthew chapter 22, verse 34 and following. It is a context of conflict. The Pharisees are trying to trap him. And Jesus shows himself here and in other places as a master of what I would call the realignment of the question asked. In other words, the Pharisees, through this man whom they refer to as a lawyer, asks a question that is legal, a question of law. The expectation is that Jesus will answer it as such and give a law. Now, that kind of thinking feeds very easily into our yearning for control. If we know what is right and wrong, if we tick all the boxes, then that's great. We've pleased God, we've pleased ourselves, and all is right with the world. Jesus realigns the question with its assumptions and its expectations. Instead of leaving it in the situational context of law, he expands it. It is a question about the whole of Torah, the whole meaning of what happened at the Exodus, the thrust of the unutterably unmerited action of God, God's initiative that reaches out through the Jewish people to the world in an act of love. God's action, God's presence repeats to us in different ways. Will you let me love you into freedom? That's our task, if you like, ultimately as human beings, to allow God to love us into freedom. Let's recall the words that Jesus quotes in realigning the question, to take them back not just to a set of laws, but to an acclamation and an affirmation of this fundamental, this seminal truth of God taking the initiative and forming a covenant of love with the people. It's the Shema prayer that Jesus quotes. The Shema is the Hebrew word for the first word in English, which is hear or listen. That's an important part of it. Here are the words of the first words of the Shema. Jesus only quotes a few of them. Hear, Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. Keep these words that I am commanding you today in your heart. Recite them to your children. Talk about them when you are at home and when you go out, when you lie down, when you rise. Bind them as a sign on your hand. Fix them as an emblem on your forehead. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. In other words, hear what I am doing. Pay attention. Never forget. The function of the prophet primarily is one of memory, helping the people to always remember. And Jesus is the prophet of prophets. He is here to remind the Jews and us who and what God is and what God has in store for us. No doubt the Pharisees would have liked a legal question because it would have given them something to use as a weapon, as a way of control. But Jesus instead invites them into the heart of God, invites them to remember the covenant of love and to live from that. Jesus invites us to hear and to remember, to allow ourselves to be drawn into that covenant of love. Never forget that we are loved infinitely and eternally, that everywhere, all the time, God is saying to us, will you let me love you into freedom? So, back to his response to the Pharisees. It's not so much a moral command as an existential statement, saying this is the way it is. Can't you hear it? Don't you understand what God is offering you? Accept it. Allow it to be operative in your lives. Allow yourself to be loved into freedom and allow yourself to become part of that freeing love for the world. We could sum it up this way. The great command is, as you have been loved into freedom, be in the world in such a way that God may love others into freedom through you.